So this is kind of a follow-up to the last video that I made on why um, I'm not super okay with what they're doing with the new Superman movie that's coming out. If you want to watch that video, I'll put a link in the description for that. I kind of with this video, I kind of just wanted to talk about. I want to kind of elaborate a little bit more on my thoughts generally on kind of black roles in the film industry in a way, because obviously a lot of the stuff comes up when we talk about comic book movies because those are the big thing now, and that stuff's usually the stuff that causes controversy. You know, like when Black Panther came out, everyone made a huge deal about that. I kind of just wanted to talk about the history of black cinema, because I think a lot of people who may or may not be, you know, into film would really. I think a lot of people are kind of ignorant about black roles when it comes to film. I brought up Black Panther earlier. I remember when Black Panther came out, and everyone was losing their minds over Black Panther. Everyone was saying, you know, oh, Black Panther, like this is the first time, you know, we've ever seen a black superhero in a leading, like a black man in a leading role, and like all this stuff. And everyone was talking about all these different things and why it was important and stuff like that. And I was kind of just sitting back and just being like, all right, I'm excited for it because I love Black Panther. I grew up with Black Panther from the comics and like some of the cartoons and the video games and stuff. But I wasn't like losing my mind over it because I didn't really think it was that big of a deal. And I think a lot of people probably did that because they don't know about other prominent black roles in cinema. You know, if you go back to there have been black leading roles in film since the silent era. There were movies made by black people in the 1920s that starred black people in the 1920s. That was kind of the first sort of, because before that, there was a lot of, obviously, the minstrel shows and stuff like that. And usually black people were played by white people, and it was kind of offensive and stereotypical and stuff like that. But even back in the 20s, there were black actors who were in films. And granted, they probably weren't big, you know, studio movies that got major play or anything like that, but that doesn't make them any less important, and that doesn't make them any less relevant. And it also kind of, like, when I hear people talk about, you know, Black Panther, or even, you know, this new Superman movie, or you know, oh, we need more black superheroes or whatever, like, it always kind of frustrates me a little bit, because it's like, there was an entire genre in the 70s, the blaxploitation genre, that was literally like, the whole purpose of that was black people didn't feel like they were represented properly, or you know, that they weren't getting enough, you know, representation in film, and they took it upon themselves to, like, hey, let's go make some movies, you know. And they did that, and we had an entire genre, we had an entire decade of films made by black people, starring black people. You know, and we had, you know, people like Pam Grier. Pam Grier became iconic for her blaxploitation roles as like Foxy Brown and Coffee. And, you know, you have people like Richard Roundtree, for the longest time, a lot of people considered him the first black superhero as Shaft. A lot of people considered that the first black superhero movie because of the type of role that is, and because of the type of movie that was. A lot of people looked at it as kind of a superhero action movie in a way, you know, but no one ever talks about especially in my generation, people don't talk about, you know, Shaft and Pam Grier and stuff like that, which makes sense because they're from the 70s. But I would think that if you were passionate about this, and if you were passionate about this subject, you would want a little bit, like, you would want to gain a little bit more knowledge about the past, because there seems to be this sort of era going on, or there seems to be sort of this kind of assumption going on that there's just never been black people in movies before, and that's not true in the slightest. You know, and we're definitely seeing more black people in movies than probably ever before, and that's great and that's awesome. But I think looking at something like Black Panther and just completely not acknowledging the movies that came before Black Panther that star black people, that were made by black people, I feel like that's kind of disrespectful to not only those filmmakers but to cinema and black cinema in general, because those people are the ones who are responsible for paving the way to us even getting something like Black Panther. They are without them, we would have never probably even gotten to see Black Panther. That movie would have never happened. And it's always fascinating to me that we're talking about black comic book roles in movies today, because comic book movies are the big thing, and everyone, there's not enough, how come every character in them is white and all this stuff. And that's a fair statement. These characters were created in the 60s and in the 30s even. Some of them, a lot of them were created by white guys, like, let's be real. But if we go back and look at the history of the comic book sort of role on film and in live action, if we go back to 1960, right, the live action Adam West Batman show, Eartha Kitt played Catwoman back in the 60s, right? That I couldn't imagine how big of a deal that was back then, but the fact that nobody talks about that, nobody, everyone just whatever, no one cares about that the fact that a black woman got to play a very iconic character of Catwoman back in the 60s. That's rad. That's awesome. And I think that's just as important as someone like Chadwick Boseman being able to play something like Black Panther. I think that's just as important, if not more important, because it was a different time. Nowadays, people act like it's the 60s, but it's really not. There have been black people in movies. I grew up watching, black people in leading roles in movies. So I don't understand this whole, this weird kind of misnomer that there's never been a black lead in a movie ever. But aping off of that, coming off of the Eartha Kitt thing, if you even look at movies like Night of the Living Dead, the original 1968 Night of the Living Dead, that movie, the main character of that movie is a black man, Dwayne Jones. And, when Cesar Romero was still alive, people would ask him, did you, that movie has a lot of kind of social commentary behind it and stuff like that. Was the casting of a black man, was that important? Was that what you were trying to get across? And George Romero would always say that, no, I cast him because he was the best person for the role. But someone like Dwayne Jones, nobody talks about Dwayne Jones nowadays. Nobody cares about Dwayne Jones anymore. You're talking about a black man in the lead in a horror film in 1968. That is a big deal. And then you have someone like Sidney Poitier, who in the late 60s and 70s, in early 70s, was like a superstar. Sidney Poitier was the first black man to win an Oscar for, I think, Best Actor. That is a big deal, and that is a huge part of black cinema and black history in general. That was kind of the first step of us, hey, we can, Sidney Poitier should be a black hero to a lot of people, but no one talks about Sidney Poitier anymore, which is weird. He's still alive. I know he's not making movies, but he's still alive, and he's made some really good movies, And I think he also was the first person to star and direct, the first black man to star and direct in a Western, I think he made the first black Western. I think, I could be wrong about that, but I know he's the first black person to direct a Western, which is pretty cool. I know people don't care about Westerns, but I think that's cool. And he made a very prominent career as a director. So it's he is literally what we want, what we're championing for now in cinema, but no one's talking about him. No one's talking. You would think that we would talk about someone like Sidney Poitier, who paved the way for future directors, like John Singleton, Anton Fuqua, Steve McQueen, not the other Steve McQueen, not the Great Escape Steve McQueen, the director Steve McQueen. He paved the way for a lot of those people, but we just don't talk about him, which is really bizarre, and I don't understand it. I've talked to a lot of people, like my brother and various people online and like friends and stuff on why, you know, I'm not super like impressed with Black Panther or anything like that. Like the way I look at Black Panther, I look at it as a regular movie. Like I don't think it deserves any points because it has black people in it. I look at it as a film, and as a film, I think it's a mediocre movie. And I've been called racist for that, which is really odd. And I've gotten in arguments over that with you know, my brother and you know, other various people online. And I just don't freak out about it. Like I just don't like. I don't think it's as big of a deal as we make it out to be, because people always say that, you know, oh, there's never been a black superhero movie, or there's never been, you know, an all black cast in a movie, or there's never been a strong black, you know, positive leading role model for kids or anything like that. And I'm like, that's not true. Like, none of those things being said are true. I grew up in an era where Will Smith was fucking like a movie star. He was huge. Will Smith was the movie star when I was coming up. He was in all sorts of movies. He was the lead role in every movie he was ever in. And he played Hancock. Like, I remember seeing Hancock in the movie theater and being like, oh man, this movie's great. It's not really like a great movie in hindsight, but like at the time, you know, I was a little dumb kid. I was like, fucking hey, this is cool. He essentially played Black Superman in a way. Like he played a superhero before Black Panther, and no one's talking about that. No one's talking about how, like, Will Smith, you know, that movie's a big deal because Will Smith played a black superhero. Like no one talks about that. And then you go further in the past, before Hancock, we see movies like Blade. There's an entire Blade trilogy of films. There's 3 Blade films. Plus there was a Blade TV show on Spike in the early 2000s that also starred a black man. Not Wesley Snipes, it was a different actor, but I think it was Sticky Fingers, that rapper or whatever. Like he's got that weird, stupid name. But there was an entire Blade trilogy where you have the lead of the movie is a black man in a very like empowering role, in a very positive role. He's not a stereotype, really. I mean, Wesley Snipes is kind of a goofball. Like he himself is kind of like a stereotype in a way, like just himself, but that's just him. But in that movie, like he's not like running around being like, you know, calling people jive turkeys and whatever. Like he's not doing that. He's just a dude who cuts vampires in half, you know? And everyone just kind of, I've brought that up before to people, and they're like, oh, well, that doesn't count. And like, why doesn't that count? Because it's old? Who gives a shit if it's old? Like it happened. Like it happened. You look at Steel, the Shaquille O'Neal movie, Steel. I know it's not a good movie. I'm not saying it's a good movie. But it's a black superhero movie based off of a comic book character, Steel, John Irons. You know, a DC movie in the 90s starring a black man about a black superhero who technically in the comics took up the mantle of Superman for a little bit in the comics. So you could technically say that Shaquille O'Neal is the first black Superman. Technically, if you want to get real technical about it. I wouldn't necessarily say that, but you could make an argument for that. No one's talking about Steel. Even after Steel, Spawn. I think Spawn and Steel came out in the same year. I don't remember which one came out first. I think Spawn came out first, but regardless, Spawn. And again, Spawn's not a good movie, but it was a summer blockbuster movie starring a black man as the title character, and it was a comic book character. He was playing a superhero. No one talks about Spawn ever. And then if you within the same year again, we had like 3 or 4 black superhero movies in the same year, and no one, like, that's not a big deal to anybody. Meteor Man, and I know Meteor Man isn't like based off of anything. You know, it's not like a real superhero movie, whatever that means. I know it's like more of a comedy, but it's still a black superhero movie. Like it's a movie about a black man who gets superpowers and goes around saving the day. Like that's, what else is it, you know? And then you have movies like Blank Man, which again is the same thing. I know it's not based off of anything, but you have 2 black actors in that movie. You have isn't it David Alan Grier and Damon Wayans doing superhero stuff in that movie? Like no one talks about Blank Man. I love Blank Man. I think Blank Man's great, and it's just fascinating to me that no one ever talks about this stuff. And then you have Catwoman that came out in 2004, played by Halle fucking Berry. A black woman, you know, like that should have been a big deal, but no one talks about that, and no one cares about that. And I understand that movie sucks, but that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about good movies. We're talking about movies that star black people and that, you know, superhero movies and movies in general, to be completely honest. And also, I think it's fascinating that we also leave out the fact that Don Cheadle has been in the Marvel Cinematic Universe for a decade at this point as a black superhero. Just because he hasn't gotten his own thing yet, and I know he will be getting a TV show at some point. He's got one coming up, Armor Wars. He's still been a black superhero for a decade, you know, but no one cares. So why do people care so much about stuff like Black Panther? That's always the thing that I'm kind of curious about. And why don't any of those other portrayals that I mentioned matter? Why don't they count? Why aren't we freaking out about those? I think personally it has to do with the time that we're in currently. We're now being told that if you don't support a movie starring a black person, you are a racist, you know, or if you don't go support a film starring a strong female character, you are a sexist. And I think that it's just the current climate of things. And I think that I also find it fascinating that like people are so passionate about this kind of issue, but yet they don't manage to actually like research this topic. They don't manage to actually like look at black cinema. They don't actually take the time to research black cinema and see that like there have been movies made by black people since the 1920s, guys, like since the silent era, and then the 70s with the blaxploitation boom, you know. And I understand that probably a lot of people in my generation probably haven't seen a lot of those movies, which is fair because they're from the 70s, you know, they're like 50 plus years old now. But that isn't an excuse for us to just forget about those movies, you know. And also you look at someone like Rudy Ray Moore, right? Rudy Ray Moore is like one of my personal heroes. Like Rudy Ray Moore was awesome. He was someone who in the 70s couldn't even make it into the blaxploitation scene because he was deemed too, like, he was older, he was not like attractive, you know, he wasn't like fit, he was kind of a schlub a little bit. And he took it upon himself to go, all right, well, if none of the, you know, blaxploitation studios or anything want me, if they don't want to cast me in the movie, I'm just gonna make a movie. Like, I don't care. And he made 4 movies in the 70s, and he became iconic. And he made those movies became huge hits. But no one ever talks about Rudy Ray Moore. No one talks about Pam Grier. No one talks about Richard Roundtree. No one talks about these iconic, you know, actors and filmmakers who paved the way for us to get something like Black Panther. And I really don't understand why. And I think that black cinema and all of these people who have paved the way for us to get to where we're at now are being forgotten. And I think it's just because people don't care. And going back to like when I was growing up, Will Smith was huge. He was huge. He was in all sorts of movies growing up. You know, he was a superhero in a way to a lot of people growing up. Martin Lawrence was huge growing up. He was the lead in a bunch of stuff. People like Jamie Foxx. Jamie Foxx was a huge... Jamie Foxx is a movie star. He can be in any movie he wants, and that movie will do amazing. Like, he's a movie star. So like I think Black Panther was kind of propaganda in a way. Maybe not like it. Maybe it wasn't made to be that, but I think how it was marketed and how it was kind of presented to us, I think it was kind of... I don't know. I say it's kind of offensive how it was kind of laid out as they were marketing the movie, because they tried to make it seem like Hollywood is this big racist, you know, landscape, and just, you know, there just never, like, there's never been a movie starring a black person ever, and like this is a big deal, and blah 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 blah. And that's just not the case. And we're lying about all this stuff in order to sell movies. That's how we sell movies now, is by forgetting about the past and by, you know, using the race of people as a gimmick to sell tickets and to get people to go see these movies. And not paying respects to the people that came before us, who paved the way, who probably had a much harder time getting their movies made and seen back, you know, in times where America was a lot more racist than it is now, guys. You know, and then if you look at horror, you know, there was... I've always seen people say that, like, oh, you know, the black guy always dies. You know, the black guy's always the first person to die. That's not true. Really, I mean, that's happened a few times in a few movies, but that's not necessarily true. I've seen a lot of horror movies that have black people in them where the black person doesn't die. They actually make it out all the way through. And actually, there's a lot of horror movies starring black people Jordan Peele, like when Get Out came out, everyone made a huge deal about that, as if that was the first black movie to star, or the first horror movie to star a black person. You know, it's not. At the time, I supported Jordan Peele because I've been following Jordan Peele since his days on Mad TV. I think he's a really talented, actor, and I think he is a very talented filmmaker. But he came out a couple years back and said something that really kind of rubbed me the wrong way, where he said he would never cast a white person in a lead in any of his films, and that rubbed me the wrong way. And I had people coming at me defending him, and I had people calling me a racist because of that, and which is fascinating because my whole stance on that was, who cares what the race of the person is? That tells me you're not going after the best actor for the part. That tells me you're only going after black people. That tells me you're not going to give a white person a chance to be a lead in one of your movies. That's racism, Jordan. That's racism. If Steven Spielberg said that, if someone like Steven Spielberg or anyone, Tarantino or David Fincher or anyone, any prominent filmmaker came out and was like, I will never cast a black person as a lead in my movie, they wouldn't have a career. They would be fired immediately, and nobody would like them, and they'd be canceled, and they'd be sent death threats left and right. But Jordan Peele gets to say something like that, and it just gets brushed under the rug. And we're just supposed to support him because black people in movies. I don't care who's starring in a movie. I don't care what race anybody is in a movie, as long as the movie's good. Same thing with gender. I don't really care about gender politics and stuff in movies. As long as the movie's good, make a good movie. That's all that matters. But it's just fascinating to me that we live in this time where we are making propaganda, race propaganda, and like everyone's just okay with it. But I've also noticed that there's a lot of movies that should be important in black culture and in this kind of current landscape that aren't important, which I find really fascinating because I don't think people care. I really don't think people care as much as they say about, having these roles and stuff in movies and TV shows. I really don't think they do. I think they want attention. And they're just like, oh, hey, Superman's black. If you don't like that, you're a big racist now. Because there are films like, I don't know, Moonlight that came out a few years back. Moonlight is a movie that literally stars all black people. It's an all black cast. It's about a young gay black kid growing up in the hood, I would say, and learning to kind of accept himself as he gets older. You see him in different periods of his life. And by the end of it, you see him accepting himself and not feeling ashamed of it after being told he should be ashamed of it by, kind of his environment that he grew up around. That is a very powerful message for anyone, whether you're gay or straight or black or white. That is a very powerful message for a movie to have. Moonlight also won 3 Oscars when it came out. It won, I think, Best Supporting Actor, because I think Mahershala Ali won it. I think it won Best Supporting Actress as well. And it also won Best Picture. Remember that? Remember when that was a big thing because they read the wrong thing at the Oscars or whatever? It won Best Picture. And every time I mention Moonlight to a black person, they've never seen this fucking movie. They've never heard of it. And it's it's not that, it wasn't marketed as something like a Black Panther because it was an indie movie. But you would think, if you were all gung-ho about, we need more black roles and stuff, you would think you would seek out movies like this. You would think you would want to support movies like this, You would think, because if I was passionate about something, my favorite filmmakers, if I have a favorite filmmaker, I'm going to keep tabs on when they're putting out a new movie so I can go support them. Like this film, The Last Black Man in San Francisco. This was one of my favorite films of 2019. This was in my top 5. I made a video about it. Go watch it. I think it was in my top 5 or top 6, I think. Favorite films. And it stars all black people. None of them are really stereotypes. At least, not the 2 main, leads in it or anything. And it's a very kind of sweet movie in a way. No one's seen this fucking movie. Nobody's seen this movie. Black people and white people. And again, it's not really a thing about marketing. The best type of marketing is word of mouth. If you see a movie and then you go, hey, this movie's really good, go see it. That's a type of marketing. Nobody's seen this movie. Nobody has looked up, all you have to do is look up black cinema, and you'll get new movies coming out all the time, and you'll get a ton of movies on there. Nobody's doing that. Nobody's championing The Last Black Man in San Francisco. Nobody's, no one's heard of this. So it's kind of, to me, it's weird because it feels like it's like a one-sided thing, that people only care about black roles and stuff when it comes to superhero movies and stuff. But why is that? Why are superhero movies nowadays more important than something like this? Something like this that was crowdfunded, that is a little indie movie that should inspire people, that should be like that. This should be what we're championing. Like a group of people came together to tell a story, and they did it. And it's a story starring black people. But like, why is something like Black Panther more important than this? If anything, Black Panther honestly isn't that important. Black Panther doesn't talk about, it half-assedly talks about like, black politics and stuff like that, like race politics and stuff. It does it really well, or it doesn't do it really well. And then at the end of the day, it's kind of just this silly superhero movie with CGI rhinos and Black Panther punching people, and that's fine. But like, why is that more important? Why is that a groundbreaking thing? But stuff like Moonlight or The Last Black Man in San Francisco aren't, or movies from the past like Shaft and Coffee and Foxy Brown and stuff. Why aren't those as important, and how come those don't count? Is basically what I'm saying, because that's always what people say. Oh, well, those don't count. Why not? We should be supporting all black cinema, no matter when it came out, no matter how old it is, no matter what it's about. All right, if you're someone who is passionate about, we need more black people in movies and stuff, watch more movies. So this video might seem a little disjointed, I guess. There's not really like much of a point behind it, I guess. I just wanted to talk about some stuff, but I kind of wanted to talk about sort of why people are kind of wrong about movies in Hollywood, and like why people are kind of ignorant when it comes to movies, black cinema or whatever, because I've just never seen people talk about anything other than Black Panther and why Black Panther is so important and all this stuff. But it's like, what about all the other films that came before it that are just as important, if not more important, that we don't talk about? And why don't those count? Why aren't those important anymore? And I kind of just wanted to talk about it and get it off my chest, because it is a topic that I'm passionate about. And I love movies and I care about movies, and I think personally race is irrelevant when it comes to movies. I think just make a good movie. But if this is something you're passionate about, you should have some knowledge about what the hell you're talking about. And I just wanted to bring in some knowledge and just rant to whoever's willing to watch this, I guess.